Hello, I'm Janice Karen, Director of Policy, Technology, and Innovation at the Massachusetts Health Data Consortium, or MHDC. I run our Data Governance Collaborative, also known as the DGC. We start each of our weekly meetings with a series of industry quick updates to learn about new and proposed regulations, laws, standards, industry initiatives, and other activity. Join us for this week's updates. If you'll move to the first update. So, for those of you who may remember, there's one component going all the way back to the May 2020 interoperability rule. There's one component that isn't actually in place yet, and that is full EHI export, which is scheduled to be in place, required by December 31st of 2023 this year. So last week, ONC put up a new blog piece discussing EHI export. A lot of it was review of stuff that they've talked about before. They sort of repeated their standard definition of EHI and then sent a pointer to their more expansive discussions of that. They gave a quick overview of the export rule, reminding folks that they're required to support it both at an individual patient level as well as a population level. And also noted that the format is not, there's no specified consistent format, but it has to be machine readable, and you must have documentation making it clear how to interpret the data. I will note, I find it ironic because the new CMS price transparency portions of the rule that are in comment period now are actually to fix this issue with the hospital price transparency rule and impose a standardized machine readable format on the machine readable files. So we'll see if it works better here than it does in that other mechanism. So to be followed, to be continued on that point. So they also pointed out that any certified health IT module that electronically stores EHI must certify to this requirement by the end of the year. They also must make it available to all of their users. However, unlike with the previous requirements for the APIs, and perhaps because of some of the things that came to light with that, they explicitly talk about, in somewhat vague and sort of not 100% clear terms, what you can and cannot infer about provider functionality. So, but what they are very clear about is what they're imposing is a requirement on certified health IT vendors that they make the EHI export functionality available to their users, and that there is no explicit requirement that users implement it. And they kind of then said, keep that in mind as you interact with information blocking and other considerations. So the implication there is not 100% clear, but basically that you can't assume that a provider has full EHI export, only that they have the opportunity to have it if they use certified health technology. And we found that distinction to be an important one when it came to support for FHIR APIs. Not clear if it will be equally as important here. Any comments or questions about EHI export?
Well, why do you think ONC is averse to specifying a format?
I think that I don't know that they're averse to it. I'm not sure they feel like it's necessary. I think the idea is that if you tell people how to read something, then they'll understand it. That's sufficient. But as you know, I am a big proponent of standardizing. It would certainly be easier if everyone used the same format. And as we've discovered with the hospital price transparency machine readable format, the level of interpretation around what is and is not acceptable and the variations in the formats and the level of documentation and how easily readable a machine readable file is are all somewhat problematic. And I would not expect it to be significantly better here. Maybe their hope is because it's technology companies who are doing the files as opposed to the hospitals themselves, that they will be more orderly about it. Or maybe it's a case of the right hand not talking to the left hand. And also, I would also note that this predate this requirement, even though it's only coming into being due now, stems from early 2020. So it's very possible that with all of the lessons learned since then, that they would make a different choice now. But I suspect at some point there likely will be a follow-on rule which specifies a format. But that's just me speculating.
And which means people get to do things a second time. But
oh yes,
so it
isn't
goes.
that fun? Well, we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're right, and having that technology vendors will be better about deciding what really is a machine readable format, and it'll be fine. One can hope. I wouldn't bet the bank on it though. Good question.
That term, let me just chime in, Jess. That term is so vague, machine readable, because it doesn't mean it's translatable to anything. I mean, just about anything is machine readable, including
well, it certainly creates extra work for the people who want to look at more than one file, because you can't automate a process that works for all of your EHI exports. So for instance, even just on an individual patient level, if I have data sitting at 4 different provider organizations and I request my EHI export from all of them, I don't remember if I said 4 or 5, but all of the 4 or 5, they're going to probably come in 4 or 5 different formats. And then I, as an individual, have to figure out how to interpret that. Now, I personally, Janice, the individual, can probably do that. She might grumble the whole time about how stupid it is that she has to do it differently, but she's capable of doing it. But the average person is going to look at that, bad enough to have one format, but if it were a single format, likely there would be other vendors who came through and said, we will take your machine readable files and present them to you in more human readable ways, right? But that's harder to do if everyone's machine readable files are in different formats, even if they are perfectly machine readable, because you can't automate that process for doing that across multiple files.
Yeah, this kind of seems, to John's point, like a shortcut to me.
Yeah. Well, it does seem to be the first starting point that both CMS and ONC started with, and CMS has just got it. CMS mandated it second, but got it in place first, and has already discovered several of the reasons why it doesn't work well, and is in the process of trying to fix it. So probably the same thing will happen on the ONC side, but we probably have to get to seeing all of the problems first. And the other advantage here, the one advantage here, is that with the hospital price transparency, every single hospital can do their own format. Here it's certified health IT vendor, so it's a smaller subset. So presumably, like, everyone using Epic would presumably have the same format. For instance, everyone using Cerner would presumably have the same different format. Everyone using Meditech, etc. So it may be slightly less problematic, and it may only hit a subset of patients who go to multiple providers who use different EHRs. But certainly the population health records for people trying to do research off of them, or trying to get data from multiple places, that's going to be almost certainly be a problem. I don't know, we'll see what happens. Any other questions or thoughts? All right, then let's move on to the next slide. Speaking of information blocking, so the official information blocking enforcement for health IT vendors and HIEs started on September 1st. So that means they opened the ability to complain on September 1st, and the violation itself must occur after September 1st. They can be fines of up to $1 million per incident. And just as a reminder, this does not cover provider compliance with information blocking. That falls under ONC, and there's expectation of a proposed rule this fall. I believe last time I checked, it was currently set for October sometime. So we'll see if that materializes, but that is expected. And then so presumably, if it's proposed in October, there'd be hopefully a reasonable comment period, and then probably the final rule sometime early next year. Fingers crossed. So they do note in there's a note in this announcement, and this is an industry article. I found it actually to be the best source of info. It was really had a lot of info in it. So there are going to be too many violations for them to investigate all of them. So they're going to prioritize violations that meet the criteria on the screen and go from there. So any comments or thoughts there? All right, well, you can always follow the link and get more information if you'd like. If you'll go to the next slide and pause there. I hope you learned a lot from our quick updates. If you're interested in finding out more about the DGC and its other activities, email me at dgc@myhealthdata.org. That email address is also on your screen.